And okay, so this is the last panel of the day. I'm particularly happy to be, I mean, everyone was a friend who was speaking today, but this is kind of my original world, right? Because of course I started 20 years ago this conference, believe it or not, in 2006 in this room. Over the years I had MARTIJN and ANDREAS and of course Barry and BENOIT and multiple predecessors discussing antitrust. So this isn't going to be a specific discussion about antitrust. There's plenty of those out there, but I wanted to end the day on this theme with these friends because not coincidentally, I wanted Julius to show up and tell us what he thought. It is something that regulators are facing today. There's been, of course, an effort by Europe for years to contain and to limit the power of the big tech platforms. And now that effort has really found a big pushback in the administration, which puts us in the difficult position of having to, of course, continue to defend it, while at the same time, and this is a personal opinion, knowing that ultimately, for the purpose of the discussion we had today, which was how do we build ourselves? How do we build ourselves up? How do we create our own assets? Then that regulation isn't going to really move the dial very much. And this isn't a judgment on regulation per se, but regulation by definition cannot create an industry, cannot create a market. So it isn't a dispute about whether the regulation was good or bad, but the point is when you are trying to ultimately push your own capabilities forward, then the question is how do you actually unleash that? And it's not by somehow clipping the wings more or less effectively of the incumbents. By all means, continue to do that, but that doesn't create the kind of environment that the previous panel was discussing. So I think that, of course, regulators have got to do their job, and this continues to be the case, but you are leaders of agencies, or of course is OECD. Barry, you've been in this discussion from the United States for a very long time. How do we actually purpose what this part of the policy agenda does, regulation, antitrust, and generally this portion of it, in a way that is more helpful to the build agenda, which is the one that we need to really push, I feel. Who wants to start? Andreas?
Yeah, thank you very much, Cristina. By the way, I'm very proud to be among the last leftovers from the competition conference, which this used to be at the latest possible hour, and I'm very happy to be here. In fact, Rafael Laguna has said a lot of what I wanted to say at the beginning. I think in Europe we have much, much more reason to be very, very confident than some people express for the time being. I mean, this is a continent with 450 million inhabitants. I always hear that compared to China, size matters. I mean, China is bigger, yes, but we are much bigger than the US. So in that sense, it cannot have to be so much, with size. There is much more. We have everything it takes for a successful industry. And I think we do not only have a traditional industry, we have just seen this panel here, especially in Germany, we have a wonderful digital community. We have very successful startups. And I would like to stretch something that Rafael has said as well. Everyone, at least for my feelings, wants to be in Europe anyway. I mean, who wants to be in the desert and earn a lot of money? I think it's much better to be in Dresden or in Berlin or in Brussels or somewhere else. So there is an excellent spirit here. Of course, we also have some problems. That is the question of competitiveness and growth. I think that is at the heart of everything. Why is Europe not as competitive as, for example, the US is? As the head of a competition agency, I must say a few words, but only a few words on competition policy, because I know that Cristina does not want me to talk about competition policy on this panel anyway. Competition is essential. Competition is essential to gain that growth. Why is this important? It is so important because I'm absolutely sure we will again get a debate about the question of European champions. If we do not have to loosen merger control in order to scale, in order to get bigger companies, in order to be competitive with these large companies in China and the US. I'm just mentioning it because I do believe this is the wrong way forward. We cannot compensate what others are not doing. And I think that is the point. The problems of Europe when it comes to competitiveness, they lie in other fields. And that is 2 points I would like to make. That is probably bureaucracy, that is costs and financial resources. If you look at bureaucracy, just take a look at the digital acts that we have in Europe. We have the AI Act, we have the DSA, we have the Data Act, we have the Data Governance Act, we have more acts. The lady from the European Parliament this morning announced lots of new acts also in the digital arena. Instead of saying, well, we are going to reduce this burden, no. Where there were new announcements of new acts to regulate the digital economy, and I'm pretty sure regulation will not bring Europe a huge digital economy. Point one. We need to do something about that. I just heard the CEO of a very large DAX company in Germany say, we move our R&D on AI to Seattle and some other countries, because if we do it in Europe, we have to have a lawyer sitting next to every AI developer. That cannot be. This is not the way forward. So to reduce bureaucracy, by the way, not only for the digital economy, also for the traditional economy, is the very first thing to do, and that is something that mostly needs to be done by Europe. I think that is very important. Second point is costs. We need to look at the costs that we have in Europe. That has a lot to do with costs for social security, for other areas, and we need to find ways, not how to reduce that to the detriment of those who need it, but to do it in a more efficient way. I think that is the way forward, that we become much more efficient on that. And the third point is financial resources. We have also heard that this morning. I think what we desperately need is a common market in Europe with regard to some areas. Telecoms is one of them. Also in order to be able to scale up in this digital branch. I think there are very few competition agencies who would be very worried if we would see cross-border mergers in Europe, in telecoms. Some of us would be worried if we see non-cross-border mergers, so we need that. And first and foremost, of course, the capital market union. The pools for money in Europe are by far too small. And if we had a capital market union, that would help a lot. So, in a nutshell, when we talk about competition policy as a facilitator of rebuilding the sovereignty of Europe, we can contribute. We can contribute through enforcing competition. We can also contribute by doing some fine-tuning to our merger work with regard to, be it efficiencies, be it investment, be it all that. But what we do there is not going to be the game changer for Europe. It is part of a reform agenda that we need to take, but I'm pretty sure it's not the largest part. It's a smaller part, and again and again, we have to reduce bureaucracy. To conclude, we should take care, because bureaucracy, we have to distinguish between blocking and enabling bureaucracy. And the DMA, the Digital Markets Act, is clearly among the enabling bureaucracies, because it is a tool, along with Section 19A in Germany, to reopen markets and to take care that the European digital community has access to digital markets and can be part of the game. So we must be very careful about where to reduce bureaucracy. The DMA matters. I'm not so sure if other acts contribute to competitiveness. If I look at the AI Act, if I look at all the sorrows of SMEs, startups in Germany, it's the same that has been happening with the GDPR. The big ones are waving, come to me with AI, come to me with GDPR. I have a large legal department, I can deal with it, I comply with everything, come to me. And the SMEs, which do not have these legal departments, have a severe problem. So we must look at this. And if we do that, this is really the good news. We can change it. It's in our hands. It's in the hands of the European Commission. It's in the hand of every national government to change things and to steer things in the right direction. And again, if I look at Europe as a whole, I'm quite confident that this is going to happen one day.
Very good. I will reserve my response for the next round, because I have views. And I will ask Martijn to go next, and then Benoit on these very same issues.
Yeah, thank you, Cristina. And I want to echo what Andreas was saying. Don't give up on regulation yet. It's not going to build our sovereignty. It's not going to make innovative markets, but it's too early to tell that the regulation is failing, in particular the Digital Markets Act. One thing you have to realize is that it takes time to make entrenched markets more open. And yes, perhaps politicians and maybe also the regulators oversold the DMA and the other acts, and that there was a quick fix to solve the problem that we're facing. You need, and the people who are in business know that, you need a bit of overselling in order to get things done. If we all portray a realistic point of view, nothing will happen. So yes, we are now in the realistic phase. The realistic phase is that it takes time for the DMA to do its work. And that is not because civil servants have a 9-to-5 mentality and take a nap during lunchtime. It's because it's difficult work. It's because we are facing armies of lawyers on the other side that wait for every mistake that we make. And we live in a rule of law, and that if we come before a court and the court finds that we have a mistake, we are dead. So we've created quite a challenge for ourselves as regulators, and it will take some time before it will work out, because before you will see it happening. And don't also forget that there was a lot of talk about deregulation and about all the laws that are taking back companies. But don't forget all the laws that are taking back regulators as well. I would love to have a Freedom Act for regulators. You would be surprised how much time we need to spend on explaining what we are doing to our ministries, explaining to the public where on every euro that we spend. And I understand it on the one hand, and on the other hand, it is extremely frustrating because it takes away from our prime responsibility, and that is enforcing the laws. The point I'd like to make as a follow-up is that innovation, resilience, sovereignty are very close to, I think, the hearts of all the regulators, of the entire EU enforcement system. We know it is extremely important. This is the key issue that we are facing. So this is a call to all the innovators, to the builders. If you think that we stand in the way, come to see us and tell us that we stand in the way. If there is something that we can do for you, that improves sovereignty, innovation, and resilience, come and ask. A couple of lessons. Don't send your lawyers who speak legalese to us. You can bring your lawyers. It's not to bring them out of the picture. But we want to hear the real story. We want to hear the story why this is important. Second, don't come to us, sorry Benoit, with yogurt is important for sovereignty. If it's really important, if it really helps building sovereignty, innovation and resilience in Europe, we will listen to you. And also come with us, and this is for the Dutch startup community, if someone else, another agency in the Netherlands or another agency in Europe needs to do something or stands in the way. We are part of one EU enforcement system. I can call up, actually I do call up Andreas if a Dutch company has a problem with or wants something from the Bundeskartellamt. And of course, it's up to Andreas whether, it's his mandate, whether that he can do that. But there is a conversation among EU enforcement agencies to make sovereignty, resilience, and innovation work for Europe. So please reach out to us.
Great. Let me move on to Benoit. Benoit?
Yeah, thank you, Cristina. I mean, it's really an interesting experiment to end a conference on growth and sovereignty with a panel of antitrust enforcers. I mean,
well, you haven't seen what I'm going to say.
It's almost it's almost surely bound to disappoint, and so maybe we should just accept it and go into the nitty-gritty of the merger guidelines and
no.
And I'm happy to do that.
No.
Okay. So first on the building part, I mean we've heard a lot today. I mean it was a very exciting and very broad discussion. There is not much I can add. To that, I'm a big fan of the the building theme and the fact that we need to build the foundations of our industry. We need to provide the infrastructures, and some of them can be public, some of them can be private. I mean, I've spent part of my professional career doing that in the payment field, so I'm absolutely convinced of that. I just wanted to say that the discussion goes a little bit all over the place. So today is about sovereignty, but tomorrow we might have a conference on innovation, and then a conference on investment, and then a conference on resilience. So it's all over the place. And as an economist, I would say that really what we should be focusing on is productivity. And that's, by the way, where the Draghi report started, by highlighting the productivity gap between the US and Europe. And also because productivity is about expanding Europe's GDP, Europe's wealth, and providing our citizens with better incomes and better lives. And so it's also about the political sustainability of the whole thing. If we're not able to build a project that will visibly improve, lift Europe's productivity, then we lose European citizens because they want to live better. So it's nice to have all these kind of very abstract political science, discussions or terms like sovereignty is nice, but at the end, it's money that matters, and that's why we should really focus on productivity. And for me, that will be the ultimate metrics of what we do, whether we've been able to bridge the productivity gap with the US. So that's the first thing. Second, what worries me here, and I'm not as a citizen more than as an enforcer, is I think what was a little bit lost in the discussion today is the political sustainability or the political feasibility of everything we're discussing. I don't see that European politics are aligned with all the nice goals that were discussed today. There is a vibrant discussion in Brussels and Strasbourg on what Europe should be doing, and we're having that discussion today. Domestic politics are entirely different. I was in a hearing in the French National Assembly yesterday. All questions were on agriculture and farming, and how can we improve farmers' income in France. And I'm not saying that in a kind of derogatory way. That's the reality of domestic politics. We've got to accept that, and we've got to be able to provide answers. So I think I see a huge disconnect between domestic politics everywhere in Europe and the kind of high-level discussions that we're having here in Brussels, and I see no attempt to bridge that gap. So that's the second thing. On competition, nothing much to add to what Andreas and MARTIJN have said. I mean, we are working a lot on the merger guidelines, so I'm still mentioning the merger guidelines.
I'm so excited about them.
I see how thrilled you are. And I think, by the way, we also need to keep antitrust enforcement strict if we want to bring innovation along, and if we want innovation not to be stopped mid-course in industries which are already very concentrated. And so we are working on that. But you know what, Cristina? I think it will be useful if we are boring, because we want it to be actionable and we want it to be delivered. And the proof of the pudding will be in the eating. The proof of the pudding is not whether the Commission can come along with nice new merger guidelines in May or June. The proof will be whether we can see mergers being cleared with efficiency defenses being accepted. That will be the proof. And we're not yet there. And for that, the whole framework has to be legally sound and it has to be economically sound. And so far, the discussion has been driven mainly by the industry. It has been driven by telecom CEOs, mostly, who really see the merger guidelines as I said it elsewhere, but I think it's a nice way to put it, as a bingo card where you just have to tick some boxes: efficiency, investment, resilience, sovereignty, you name it, and they throw all these words at us and they see what happens. Well, that's not the way it works. Right? And so it needs a lot of technical work. We're doing it together with the Commission, and I'm very hopeful the Commission will come with something that works. Finally, Cristina, I would like to push back a little bit with something that has been a theme in the discussion today, and particularly in your armchair discussion some minutes ago, which is, Europe has to. We just have to forget about all these rules and just, the rule of law. All that is old style and boring, and now we just have to engage in a transactional discussion with the US. I think that doesn't work. I think if you want to succeed in a negotiation, you want to know where you want to go, and you want to know what your values are. If you start a discussion by reneging on your values, you're not going to go anywhere. Even the DSA, I'm not a big fan of the DSA, so don't mistake me on that. But the DSA is there for a reason. It's there to protect free speech and democracy in Europe. And that's part of our core values. I mean, GDPR is here to protect the privacy of our citizens. There are many ways it could be improved, but it is there for a reason, and that has to do with our values. If we start a discussion with partners which are not benevolent, such as the US or China, if we start that discussion by reneging on our values, we're not going to get anywhere. I think I can stop here. I can talk about the DMA later if you're interested.
Okay, great. Ori, and then I'll have my comeback to all of you.
Why after me? That's not fair.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I want to perhaps reflect on two words that were barely mentioned here today. The second one is competition, and I'll touch upon that later, but the first one is sustainability, the environment. And the reason I'm mentioning it now is that if we had this conference 2-3 years ago, this could have been the key theme. Because back then the discussion was about how the way competition kind of interact with the green transition. And I found the two discussions, the one that we had today and the one that we had back there, to be very similar, because in both cases kind of competition officials are kind of thinking, scratching their heads, saying how can we contribute to this important policy goal? And I'm taking a risk now by mentioning the role of competition at the dinner table. So is it a side dish? Is it a main course? Is it maybe a dessert? I think it's not that important. It probably depends on the actual policy discussion that we are having. But I think we can all agree that competition is not a full meal. So when you're thinking about competition in the context that we had today, you need to bear in mind that it always comes along with other policy goals. And as I said earlier, competition was barely mentioned here today. And in a sense, that's fine, because when you think about the sovereignty of Europe, perhaps competition is not the first thing that comes into mind. Perhaps the discussion should not be primarily on competition policy, but at the same time, the fact that it was barely mentioned here today perhaps is a bit worrying for all the reasons that the other three speakers mentioned, that we need to, I mean, we are, from the discussion earlier today, it seems that Europeans are somewhat looking at envy at the US with the big tech firms. Just we need to bear in mind that the big tech firms raise serious competition issues, both in the US and in Europe. So maybe we should kind of be careful what we wish for, because, I mean, if they're monopolists are monopolists in the end of the day, and even if they're European, we should not expect a very different behavior from their side.
Good. Now, I am on the panel as a panelist, so I will give you my views, and I'm on the panel as a panelist also because otherwise this would be a manual, and I know that this wouldn't be acceptable. So there you go, you get the full force. So, I mean, to this last point, this was not a competition conference. I'm very grateful that you guys are here, but the purpose of this conference was not antitrust remotely, not even competition. The focus is sovereignty, and I'm not going into definition, intended though as an effort as Europeans to build up, as we discussed all day, assets and capabilities that we have, that we know we are good at, that we are amazing at, but at the moment are underdeveloped in multiple domains. So the digital world, the defense, and blah, blah, we have discussed this all day. So the focus was on build rather than, you know, the competition aspect. So that's why it wasn't primarily, there's plenty of antitrust and competition conferences out there where you can discuss the merger guidelines until your heart's content, but I don't care. And I don't think that that is what it takes to really get further into a discussion of how do we improve productivity, because I completely agree with you, Benoit. In fact, I think you missed the discussion this morning. I started off by saying that, you know, the drag emission, the productivity growth is the objective, is the reason I care about building European assets. It's not just security. It is because it supports value capture by Europeans. And so that is where I see the importance of building. It's not, in inverted commas, just the killer switch. It is in value capture, is in creating businesses that grow, and that's why I care. Of course, in this world, competition plays a role, competition enforcement plays a role, but it's not, as you say, the main plot. We have this meme that competition is just a side dish. No, sorry, but it's not certainly the main plot, okay? It is something accessory that can help preserve some degree of level playing field and so on, and we certainly don't want to do without it. However, and this is my plea, I don't necessarily agree with Julius. I want him to provoke us, right? Because it's all very well for us to meet in this room and tell again to one another, Europe is a great place and we have values. But there's another world out there. They're out there. They don't see it like we do. And we need to consider various points of view. So the point of view that Julius puts is, okay, this DMA stuff doesn't seem to do very much. I know it's early days, but let's kind of count the cases, okay? There's something feeble on Google that is kind of trundling along and not going anywhere. There's something feeble on Apple. Newsflash, they're settling all their cases. There's nothing going. There's something small on Meta. Nothing new is being opened. So I cannot sit here and hold my breath and say, my God, the DMA is going to be, in 10 years, a game changer. No, it isn't. So realistically, when you think I have you don't want to give up your values, but when you have a hill you're going to die on, it better be a hill that matters and not a hill that doesn't do very much, which is my perception of the DMA. Now, Julius is saying, look, you got this stuff that is being pushed back, that the platforms actually are weaponizing the Trump administration again. You could have another way of going. You could stand on your horse and say, this is our value, this is our law, and we will enforce it. Or you can say, well, how about we just do something like this in exchange for something else? Now, this may be morally corrupt or morally something we don't want to do, but that's how the Trump administration works. And so it is in the gift of deal makers, which we're not, let's face it, to do that, but we're not. Final point from me, and before I pass on to Barry, while I do support, of course, the goals and the perspective of competition, we have also got to accept that the kind of entire structure of this tool is not designed to move things fast and in a big way. It's small, incremental steps, okay? And this is something I'm not saying. Lina Khan said it recently, and I used it on an article. Antitrust is small ball, meaning small incremental steps. You know, gee, there wasn't anyone more animated than me on the Google search case. I was there working for Free for Texas for years trying to push that case. It ended up nowhere, okay? Nowhere, even in the United States. In Europe, nowhere. So we completely failed to do anything to put a dent on Google. Google are over there. And so we can all say enforcement is important, but we didn't get to hold back. So in that world, I question, you know, I believe in all of this, and I think it needs to continue. But how do we fail to see that this is something that it isn't achieving an awful lot, a bit? We need to build big time, brutally. And, you know, maybe there is a way in which you can say maybe this experiment didn't work very much. Let's get something else out of it. So Barry, wait.
Thank you, Cristina, and it's great to see you all. But, you know, Cristina, once again, you have absolutely transformed the debate. Those of you who were here last year, most of you were, you know, last year's conference was pretty fearful. It was gloomy. It was backward looking. It was looking towards what we had just lost. And this year's conference is, you know, it's practical. It's pragmatic. It's active. It's forward looking. It is structured on actually achieving things. And I think that is a terrific pivot from where we were last year. And I think what you just said, which is like, you know, I am not against democracy. I'm not regulating, I'm not against regulations to protect democracy, but wake up, folks. So I actually want to start off by, you know, Cristina, over the last, 20 years, but especially over the last 8 years, has led a conversation that has been fantastically important on both sides of the Atlantic. And I think that Cristina herself deserves applause. Now, and we didn't practice that. No. This was off the cuff. So anyway, I want to start off by saying hello to my civilizational allies. There's a couple of definitions of civilizational ally going on out there, and I won't mention what the other one is. My definition of civilizational ally are the people who, for the past 400 years, have worked to create liberal democracy and open society, to protect the dignity and absolute freedom of the human spirit. That's what we have done, us, the civilizational allies, who have fought power, concentrations of power, to protect the dignity and liberty of the human being. And so I think that's an awfully fantastic thing that we have achieved over these last 400 years. Now, I do think that right now, so how does this actually now sort of connect to this question of build agenda? Now, as you guys know, I have for a number of years focused really kind of maniacally on one issue, which is the rise, the danger of oligarchy, of autocracy, and the means of this imposition of an autocratic system of control over mind, over spirit, over our hands, over how we create. And, you know, I would venture to say that the warnings that I and other people delivered over these last 10 years have been proven correct. We see oligarchy, we see systems of autocracy. They are out there. But that's, you know, I'll get back to that in a second. You know, because today is actually the build agenda. And actually, I think that speaking about build is actually a good way to figure out what to do about autocracy. Because it's the same problem. It's the exact same problem. It's the same systems of control. So, you know, I'm here again to warn again about these controls. But it's really also just to do so by sort of witnessing from the lessons I've learned. Now, you guys, most of you know me as someone who's been working on tech issues, on, you know, the issues of, you know, Google and Facebook, and I don't have to go through the list. You know, but I got into this work 25 years ago by looking at the concentration of power within industrial systems. We've heard a lot about TSMC. We've heard a lot about Chinese control over industrial systems. We've heard about how this restricts our ability to build things. I wrote that article. I wrote the first article 25 years ago. You can look it up in Harper's, the cover of Harper's magazine in June 2002. It was called Unmade in America, The True Cost of a Global Supply Chain. That was what I wrote 25 years ago. Now, we heard Julius Krein a second ago say, you know what, these systems failed. And it's like, God damn, they failed. But we knew they were going to fail. We were warned. And it's like, it's not that my article was ignored. My article was covered in The Economist. My article went into the U.S.-China Security Review Commission. We saw the threat. We saw the threat of this concentration of power over manufacturing, over our ability to build. We saw how it could actually lead to dependencies. I wrote about dependencies, industrial dependencies, which was something new at the time. And yet, I wrote about, and this is all based on an analysis of TSMC. TSMC. And here we are, 25 years later, and it's only gotten worse. It's only gotten worse. So there's a failure. I just want, you know, it's like there was failure in Europe. You were warned 25 years ago. You were warned most recently by the G7. There was a G7 report in 2021, and there was an OECD report in 2020 about supply chain. It's like you ignored that, but we ignored it too. America ignored it too. Actually, but Biden and Trump, the first in somewhat of a coherent way, and the second one in a less coherent way, but an energetic way, have tried to disrupt this concentration of power, this concentration of control. So how do we get, you know, bringing this back to build, what are the things that we have to focus on? I mean, Europeans have to focus on also. Understand you are in a war, a two-front war. I said almost the exact same line last year. Two-front war. One, an industrial war. An industrial war in which you have a Cold War, a mercantilist war by China. They're trying to destroy your industrial system. No ifs, ands, or buts. And then you have a hot war, an industrial war in Ukraine. And they're integrated because China supports Russia. The second war is, and I know we're not supposed to talk about this, but it is the sort of the tech war on European democratic systems of regulation, backed by the USG at this point. You know, so those are the two wars you're fighting. And if you don't understand it as a war, you don't know what to do, because what you have to do is you have to protect your industry, and you have to protect your communications and your democracy, and you have to do it on a war footing. And you know what? We just were talking about the DMA and the DSA. They're not fit for war. They are not fit for war. You have to, it's like, this is not about like, should we get rid of the DSA or the DMA? You have to take it to a whole nother level if you are going to survive as a society, as a democracy. You have to take it to a whole nother level, and you got to do it today. Now, compared to a year ago, what is happening in this, what I've seen in this room, is a fantastically different, so much better attitude. You have, I mean, people in the United States, you know, we've had a bad year. Europe's had a good year. Europe's had actually a good year. And it's like, and you should recognize that and you should run with it. Every advance that you have made over this last year, you should build on. We've gone backwards in so many ways, but we're not here to talk about that. That's our fight. We're fighting that fight in our borders. You know, we're not going to ask you to fix that because you got so much to fix here. But you know, so, but the, you know, when it comes to, just remember, it's like when it comes to building, your biggest tool is breaking the power of the monopolist and the mercantilist who means to restrict you. So we have a lot, you know, it's like antitrust is small bore. Antitrust is tiny. I have never in my professional life said the answer is antitrust. I've always said anti-monopoly. Because anti-monopoly, broadly understood, political economy broadly understood, is how you use power of the government to break power, to break every choke point over communications and over your hands and your minds and your ability to build things. So you guys are in a spectacular moment, and Cristina herself has helped to establish this moment. And these people on this dais, I mean, they fought, you know, rearguard actions and they fought advance actions that have made you all safer. But, you know, now's the time to really realize that this is both an incredible, it's a fantastic opportunity. It's the opportunity of a century, but only if you take it, and you have to take it.
Very good. Fantastic. Go ahead. Would you like to add something, comment?
I agree with everything that Barry has said, but I'm just wondering what we can do on that as heads of a competition agency. You should go into policy, Cristina.
I've abandoned antitrust,
this is exactly what you need to do if you want to tackle these kind of questions. When it comes to bureaucracy, to reduce that, to make the European economy fit for future, this is what you need to do. When you want to go against costs, energy costs are crucial for the future. By the way, not only for the old economy, also for the new economy. Energy costs are crucial, and there is no simple answer to that. And there is certainly not an answer that only competition agencies can really give. The question of an internal market with regard to so many economic areas, that is nothing that we can do with our tools. We can say it would be more competitive if we had an internal market, yes, and we can advocate for that, yes, and we do that, but it has to be done by others. And then you come to the question of political feasibility. And this is at the very latest point, at the very latest stage, the point where it is very difficult for people like us leading an agency to continue. What we can do is in our realm, we can contribute what we can contribute, and that is by making best use of the tools that we have at hand. And having said that, I think I'm coming back to what MARTIJN has said. I think exactly, just to give an example, the DMA and also Section 19A are at a point where the first time they really have an impact on certain markets. We haven't seen it like that before, but that is happening now to a certain extent. It is not, we're not getting there to the full extent. I fully agree, but I think that takes time. I've been working for Parliament 35 years ago. I've written papers that we cannot rely just to the pension that is state organized, but we need a capital market stock. That is taken up now by policymakers in Germany 35 years later. Sometimes it takes time, Cristina. And also here, to have an impact by applying completely new tools, to get that through courts as well, before it can have an impact, a real impact, that takes time. But I repeat that, we are there where the first time ever it has some impact, and this is what we can contribute, and we do.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not pushing back on the contribution you make. The issue to me is perhaps put it differently. So much of the conversation, and to MARTIJN's point, there's been an overselling, no question, of what this stuff could do. because it did occupy so much of the conversation, almost as if by enforcing these rules, automatically and naturally we were going to sprout wings and we were going to create an industry. There are friends in this room who are competitors to the platforms and can tell stories of having believed that regulation was going. You had an event in Amsterdam a year and a half ago, and there was a lot of SMEs believing that actually these rules were going to actually open the market for them. It hasn't happened yet. It hasn't really made very much difference. So fine, maybe it's early days, but we cannot deny that the discussion in the public sphere has been very much all about that, rather than how do we build our stuff? And it continues to be that, because how do we build our own cloud? How do we build our own sort of software and chips? That's why I had the chips person on this, because it matters. It matters. These things are where we are dependent. So we're not having a disagreement on, of course, I never thought that antitrust could lead the way, or competition could lead the way to growth. I think that is a gross misrepresentation. The UK is going into that direction, and in fact, it's killing the CMA. Let's call it out. But it can contribute. I know over the years I had my own views that the community was too reluctant to open up, to understand industrial policy, to embrace industrial policy as part of competition. But that's by the way. Let me just stop here for myself. I mean, to me, just when you say you should go into policy, I've abandoned antitrust very self-evidently because I don't do it anymore, because I don't find that it moves the dial enough. And of course, you're in a different position because you're head of agencies, and so you have to continue to do that. But for me, the mission now is there are people here who come from Silicon Valley and have said to me, I'm European, I'm in Silicon Valley, I want to come back to Europe because I think there's a vibe change.
Real quick, I mean, this, to defend antitrust's role in creating innovation, just a little bit of history. The IBM case, the AT&T case. No. It equals the PC revolution. The Microsoft case leads to the internet.
We've heard all of that.
And actually on Google, the Google cases, it's slow. If you had not taken that action against Google, those two actions,
Barry,
Google would have been twice the size it is now.
Well, okay, so what do I know? But the thing is that I mean, these are the kind of stories I hear all the time. And it's fine. We've been telling each other for 15 years that look what antitrust can do. I'm not disputing. It's in the history. Fine. Medal. Now, what going forward are we doing? This is the question.
Yes, thank you. I want to steer the discussion a little bit away, because I think what Julius Krein was saying was actually quite interesting. But also I think we need to come up with a better response than become transactional. And here I think I have a slightly different opinion than what you suggested. Yes, we need to be transactional, but not on everything. And this is not a matter of values or of principles or rule of law or democracy. This is just the fact of security. We are at the moment, and this is what I really liked at the first half, until the previous panel of this conference, is a common understanding that our society is overly dependent on a few suppliers from the US. And that we need to address. You cannot transaction that away. And it's not, the answer is not, okay, we're going to make something that they want, but we'll still be dependent on them. We need our independence. It's impossible to do that across the entire board. But, and I think that was a call today, an industrial policy that really looks at the choke points for our economies, for our society, and we need that policy to create companies in Europe that provide the services that reduce the dependency we have at the moment, because that creates the sovereignty. And again, if we're as the ACM, we're not only an antitrust authority, we have a whole range of a big mandate. If there's anything you believe that we stand in the way of that movement, let us know.
Perfect.
But if I may,
Yeah,
if I may just add, there are many more dependencies, by the way. I mean, when it comes to raw earths, we depend on China. And here also it takes not a competition, but a state strategy. If I got it right, in the US, if there's any procurement in the area of defense, it's a precondition that rare earths for this project only stem to something like 15% from China. And the rest must stem from other states. So it also takes a state strategy as an anchor client to many of these products to go against dependencies. You know, that is not only something for us, that is something for every kind of procurement act that is happening.
Let me add a real quick additional action by the Trump administration, which was extremely important. They, a couple of weeks ago, banned all imports of drones from China, all components of drone components from China. They will open the door, the border for specific components on an emergency basis, but otherwise it is a complete and absolute prohibition on Chinese drones. So that is the kind of, now it means that the cost of a drone in the United States is going to be 3 times what it was. But it means next year it's going to be 2 times. It means a year after that, maybe it'll be down to 1.5 times. That's the kind of action that you need during wartime.
Yeah, two last thoughts. First, on the DMA. I mean, the fact that the DMA was oversold doesn't make it a failure. Yes, politicians oversell, but if you believe them, it's your fault. It's not theirs. That's what they do. And we should judge the DMA on what it is, which is a way to tweak the conduct of a limited number of big techs in a limited number of markets in a way that make them fairer and more open. And that might be happening. I mean, for me, the kind of the litmus test of the DMA will be if and when I can use a payment app other than Apple Pay on my iPhone, and that's coming. It's not yet the case in France. It's coming, and when that happens, it's a practical change, a practical benefit for consumers. That's the kind of things the DMA is achieving. So it's limited, yes. It's not changing the market structure of the market, right. But it's obviously too late to change the structure of that market, other than having new players emerge, which is your building thing. Yeah. I think we can agree on all that. And sorry, I'm just finishing. And frankly, I mean, saying that the DMA is extracting a rent on US big tech. I mean that's a joke.
Laughable.
No? It's a joke. Laughable. No, just compare the numbers. I mean, and that's the end of the joke.
But it's laughable. So. That's what I told you, Julie.
Second, and maybe at a more philosophical or maybe sociological level, you know, maybe next year, Cristina, you shouldn't invite us at all. That would be the kind of logical culmination of this conference. We'll sit. We'll come. I promise you that I will come to listen, even if I'm not on stage. And that's for a simple reason. I mean, don't expect bureaucrats to change the world. We're not there to do that. It's not our job. And I had a sense of that in my previous career as a central banker. You know, I've been a central banker for 8 years, and I've seen the moment where central bankers were seen and wanted to sell themselves as, you know, wizards who can control global markets, and that always comes with a huge political backlash. Of course it does. So all your wish lists and everything that has been discussed today, I mean, these are commendable goals. They have to be delivered by elected governments, elected parliaments, and then we'll go along and we'll help and we'll enable. I think the word that Andreas has used is really a good one. We see ourselves as enabler down that road, but don't expect us to lead the pack, because
no, I certainly don't. Okay, Ori.
Yes, maybe just to bring the conversation a little bit towards what competition can bring to the table, and I think it can. Where we talked throughout the day in a different context about the AI revolution, and we see, and we've in the OECD written a lot about it, and there are serious competition issues in this sector. And one of them, for example, is the integration of new AI tools into the ecosystems. Now, by now, we know all about ecosystems. And I think it's quite a consensus that AI is going to revolutionize the way we live our lives. And when AI is being integrated into existing ecosystems, well, in this case, there might be something that competition authorities can do that can be very influential.
That terrifies me, because the idea that competition authorities can now intervene preemptively into a market that is, I mean, look, I'm a competition person, but the notion that somehow this community can deliver better outcomes in terms of market structure or something in AI is horrifying, because I don't think we're equipped to do that. We can't even deal with things that are in the past and manifest themselves as actual monopolies, and the idea that we can preempt them is even more a little bit terrifying. No, I agree, but I mean, just again, to perhaps explain, I come from this community, and I'm not expecting this community to lead the change of the world. Gee, lawyers don't change the world, right? Nor do economists. So we are not, but that's why I think that the emphasis needs to go on to the build, the actual industry. The Eurostack thing that I've been pushing is an industry initiative, right? Because it needs to have the power, the capabilities, the competencies of tech and entrepreneurs. And that is really where I think the build needs to come, not indeed from even the government or even the parliament or even the commission, because they don't know how to build, quite frankly.
I actually do think there is something that the antitrust enforcers here can do, and that's speak up. You guys understand power. You've studied power. You've studied concentrations of power. You study the harms that come from concentrated power, the harms on democracy, the harms on innovation, the harms on, on pricing. You know what happens from concentration. And so, but it's like you guys, but at the same time, there is a space for people to speak out about the need to move faster. You guys just say, I can't fix this. Be honest about that. But tell that to your bosses. Tell that to your presidents.
But
tell that to your prime ministers.
But they do. I don't think they don't. I think where perhaps, this is a highfalutin stuff that actually doesn't turn me on right now. Because it's like, tell everybody about the power. I heard that. The issue is, concretely, so, for example, one of the things we heard today is, from Dragos to Dorace. One of the problems that we have in passing European preference kind of norms is that there will be a pushback based on discrimination, based on anti-competitive discrimination. So this is something very concrete that competition authorities can do and can say, knock it off. Knock it off. Don't come around brandishing this stupid stuff, dear lawyers, for big tech as discrimination. Because, we've got other priorities. We've got kind of Europe to think about. And whether you feel discriminated, go home.
Well, there is a problem here. It's like Trump has taken control over antitrust in the United States. He says, I will decide.
Okay,
he says, I will decide. But that means is that every aspect of antitrust enforcement in Europe is now made invalid. Everything that you have, every process, every formula you have developed over the last 80 years no longer functions at a point where your prime trading partner has said, I am going to decide based on my interests and my nation's interests who merges with whom and how they do that. And so it's like, that is the other rupture. That is the other rupture.
But that's not my problem. I'm not going to have here a discussion about how Americans deal with power.
No, this is how you deal with power, because we're projecting power onto you.
Yeah, I get it. but there is stuff they can do, which is not to say boo Trump, but it is to say, no, we're going to actually push back concretely when somebody tries to use our own rules, use competition, for example, in a way that is weaponized against us. That is something that concretely can be done, and I prefer that than talking generally about democracy and preserving against power, because that conversation has been had, it didn't go anywhere in Europe.
So no democracy?
No, but I'm saying build, and that delivers. That's my pitch. I think we all need a drink at this point. Thank you, everyone. There is champagne over there, and please stay for a bit. Thank you so much.
No, absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you so much for coming. It's always fun.